cultivating a mindful state in clinical practice. The dominant neuronal wiring of our patients with complex chronic disease is pain, frustration, and deep suffering. So how do we cultivate a mindful state in clinical practice? First, we notice, and then we accept whatever it is that they say and whatever it is that they're feeling. We don't tell them why that can't be so, because the labs don't show it, or I don't think it's so. We just accept whatever it is. So awareness, when you deconstruct it, is the operating system of behavior change in every transformational process, and the underlying or the first step in any mindfulness or meditation. You have to become aware of what is. So it's the key to all behavior change. It's the point of connectivity for all mind-body techniques. So how do we as clinicians cultivate awareness? Meditation is one of them, and there's many forms of meditation. We're going to go through this. Focusing on your breath is one of the fastest ways. And imagery. And not only imagery like you taking somebody to a beach or, a scripted imagery, but looking at the images and the metaphors that people choose to use, because that's a direct window in to what's going on with them. So, meditation. We're going to talk about this longer. So all of these techniques, one is not better than the other. They're all fingers pointing at the moon. So what I mean by that is they're pointing towards a state of consciousness, but they're not that state of consciousness. So TM isn't better than mindfulness, isn't better than mantra, isn't better than imagery, isn't better than breathing. It doesn't matter. It's whatever way that particular person, whatever resonates with them, that will get them into the ultimate state of meta-awareness, if you want to use that terminology. So meditation, this is a great quote. He who understands others is wise. He who understands himself enlightened. If your mind isn't clouded by unnecessary things, this is the best season of your life. So meditation is medicine. And the definition, it's not sitting in an ashram over in India in orange with your head shaved for weeks on end. I mean, it can be that, but it's more basic than that. So I want to demystify it. It's really being in the moment. So anything that brings people into the present moment is a meditative experience. So if you're a basketball player and it's a big game and you've been fouled and you're on the foul line and the crowds are cheering and it's you and the basket and the crowds fade to the backdrop and it's just you, the basket, and the ball, that's a form of meditation. If you're a surgeon and you're about to operate and do open heart surgery on somebody and you've got a scalpel in your hand, you are completely focused on the task at hand, hopefully. That's a meditation. I have this one patient that comes to me that every time I go in the waiting room, she is knitting. And she's completely in the moment. I have to call her name like 3 times, and it's not because she can't hear. But that is her version of meditation. She just focuses on what's going on with her knitting. For some people, it's gardening. For some people, it could be ping pong. Whatever that thing is that keeps you fully present in the moment, that's your form of meditation. Could be ballroom dancing. Because if you're not fully present when you're ballroom dancing, you're going to step all over your partner's feet. So anything that keeps the mind focused in the present moment is a meditation. Can I call you back, Ed? I'm in the moment here. There was this article in the New York Times that, the technology isn't going away, right? The technology is what the technology is, but it hijacks the limbic system in multiple ways. Not just because it distracts us, but it actually, what they found is when people get texts and send texts, they hold their breath. In the process of holding your breath, you have a buildup of carbon dioxide. It actually creates more anxiety. It's not even the information coming at you. So what I've started to do is use the technology with my young clients, with my patients, and said, you know what? Every time you send a text or get a text, take a 20-second mindful breath or one mindful breath and be really present when you send it. And you'll probably send different information, right? It's a wise thing to do in general. And when you open one. So you can use the technology to your advantage. So most people aren't they may start to meditate 20 minutes in the morning or 20 minutes at night. But if you can weave it into something that people are already doing, every time you're at a stoplight, Become aware and notice where's my breath. Find my breath. Every time you are on a checkout line at the grocery store and you're getting anxious, you've got to be somewhere, just notice where your mind is and find your breath. So that all day long, they're doing this parasympathetic reboot. So you want to weave it, and that's the ultimate. You want to weave it into people's life. You don't want to be isolated to being in a cave somewhere or being at a retreat at Kripalu for 3 weeks, right? It's more ordinary than that, and we want to begin to weave it because that's where the power of it is for people to embody it and integrate it into day-to-day experiences. So what do we know about the meditative experience? Let's look at some of the science, and the science is just exploding on meditation and the brain. So meditation in the brain. So this is what we know. It increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and those changes start at about the 20-second mark of focused attention. It stimulates the left prefrontal cortex. So when our brains function synergistically and we're fully alive and awake but grounded at the same time, we're in the free prefrontal cortex. It facilitates neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. That's the connection between neurons. That's the brain-derived neurotrophic factor is the chemical that does that. And so neurogenesis is the creation of new neurons, and neuroplasticity is the plasticity of the brain. So it changes structure and function of the brain. Actually, some of the new research is showing it decreases the aging of the brain if you do it on a regular basis. So it's dose-related. So most of us walk around, and we're habitualized to live in the midbrain. And so the midbrain is fight or flight, fornicate or feed, and sometimes freeze. And we're usually rotating around any one of those at any given time. But when you move people to the prefrontal cortex, what they found by functional MRIs is when they're in those regions of the brain, they have a higher sense of connection to others, connection to service, feeling of love and union. So people feel differently, more expanded when the prefrontal cortex, especially the left prefrontal cortex, lights up. So the habitualized mind. The conditioned mind is a suffering mind. So making people aware of the habitualization of the mind is really, really important. So we're always either comparing, competing, contrasting, criticizing, condemning, complaining. We're rotating through any of these at any given time. But through some of these practices, you can move people to becoming clear, calm, and connected to themselves and connected to those around us. So what we know, Hebbs Law, is neurons that fire together wire together. So anytime you think or do anything over and over again, you create wiring in the brain where that pattern becomes hardwired and automatic. And the default mode or the negativity bias of the mind is dominant. So most of us walk around, we might not say this out loud, but we say it to ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not skinny enough. I'm not something enough over and over again. Or every time we get in a car, we grab a cigarette, or every time we walk in the door, we've been good all day with our food, and then we binge eat. Anything that we do physically or emotionally over and over again, you create neuronal networks where that pattern becomes automatic and habitualized. So you're not even conscious most of the time you're doing it. So the first step is becoming aware or conscious of what it is you're doing, thinking, and saying on a regular basis. So our habitual mind and our tendencies are not our destiny. That we can create new patterns of behavior and new neuronal networks really until our very last breath. And it starts with 20 seconds of anything. So what we're talking about is cultivating the observing aspect of our nature, of our mind. And through cultivating this observing aspect of our mind, we can move from comparing, competing, contrasting, criticizing, condemning, complaining to calmness, clarity, compassion, and deep connection with ourselves and those around us. This is from Scientific America, The Mind of a Meditator. Really interesting. In 2005, the Society for Neuroscience brought the 14th Dalai Lama to speak. And there were a few hundred members that actually petitioned not to have him. Like, what's he doing here? You know, he doesn't belong at a scientific meeting. And what he had to say was really provocative and ultimately incredibly productive for the science we have now. So he starts out and he said, what relationship does Buddhist philosophy, ancient Indian philosophy and tradition, and modern science have in common? And I don't know, they don't seem to match. And he said, everything. You are men of science. You're obligated to begin to investigate what kind of changes happen both to the brain and the body when people cultivate these different states of consciousness. So Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin and a few others took it to heart, and they began bringing over these yogis and investigating through functional MRIs and EEGs what are the different states that they could achieve pretty quickly. And then they began taking ordinary people, and in a very short time, like 10 hours of meditation, they began to be able to achieve some of the same states. So these very experienced meditator gamma states are peak experiences. And those of us, we may, if we're lucky, once or twice a year have these very peak experiences in the last short bursts of time where we'll go into this gamma wave. These yogis could sustain these gamma waves for hours. And they move back. Everybody thinks meditation is stopping the mind and it's like flat line of the brain. No, it's not like that. It's they're actively still, and they're going back and forth between these alpha and these gamma wave states. And doing this actually recruits and helps heal and restructure different parts of the brain. Then they started studying just taking ordinary people for 10 to 12 weeks and studying the impact of yoga and meditation on cellular aging. And what they found after 10 weeks of yoga and meditation, a decrease in 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine, that's the oxidative stress of the body, decrease in free radicals, decrease in cortisol, decrease in IL-6, that's inflammation, what Bob was talking about. There's an increase in total antioxidant capacity, in telomere length, beta endorphins, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, SIRT2 Very impressive. And these were novice meditators. These weren't yogis over in India for months and months. They taught them in a 10-week class. So mindfulness practice increases gray matter of the brain with experienced meditators. Now they're doing studies. There's thousands of studies if you go into PubMed now. There used to be about 10, 35 years ago. And now there's thousands and thousands. Decreases CRP and psychological well-being and symptomatology with inflammatory bowel disease. Increases telomere length. You know, telomeres are the shoe caps at the end of the DNA that stop it from fraying. With complex chronic disease and aging, it shortens. Actually, meditation increases telomerase, which is the enzyme that makes it grow. Now, we're in Seattle, right? So you know that mindfulness has hit the mainstream, and when Pete Carroll from the Seattle Seahawks is having his whole team practice, just like they would practice routes out on the field, practice meditation. So Pete Carroll is really innovative thinking. What he thought was if I taught them mindfulness meditation, that the individual player would have more focused attention and individually they would play better. What he didn't anticipate is that the whole team, there was a resonant field because they would meditate together during practice sessions. The whole team began to have anticipatory awareness on the field. They could anticipate where their teammates were going to be. They were in what athletes call that state of flow with themselves and with each other. If any of you read the book Sacred Hoops, Phil Jackson, he was one of the coach for the Chicago Bulls. So he actually brought these same type of principles into the way he coached his basketball team. I think he said this quote, basketball, just like life, the joy is found when you're in the moment. Whether you're winning or losing, if you're fully present, is where you find the joy. So it's something to look at. It's brought into all types of different athletes are using it in the Olympics now too. So this is an overview of all of the research. I have all the research studies in here, but there's changes in brain waves, moves people to the prefrontal cortex, move them to the parasympathetic nervous system, positive changes in neurotransmitter, gamma and alpha wave state for long-term meditators, an increase in cortical thickness. So let's identify, again, I'm going to deconstruct it, all the different types just for teaching purposes. A lot of them intersect on each other. So concentrative meditation is mantra. And then there's awareness, loving kindness, and expressive. So let's look at mantra. So I teach meditation on Wednesday night with this great long-term meditator, and he was editor-in-chief of Alternative Therapies magazines, called Sheldon Lewis, and he told me this parable that really has stuck with me, and people really understand mantra. So I'm going to share it with you after I tell the story. So there was a shopkeeper over in India, and he got this monkey as a pet, and the monkey was completely disruptive, going all around his store, knocking things down. And he's like tearing his hair out, and so he said to his friend, I don't know what to do. I'm going to have to get rid of this monkey. And his friend said, there's a wise man up on the hill. Why don't you go see the wise man and find out if there's anything you can do? So he treks up this big hill, waits on this long line, right? There's always a wise man on a hill somewhere. Waits on this long line, gets up to the wise man, explains his dilemma. I got this monkey. He's really disruptive. I got to get rid of him. The wise man looks at him and says, take a rope and hang it from the ceiling. So the shopkeeper says, take a rope and hang it from the ceiling. That's all you got for me? Take a rope, hang it from the ceiling. And he sends him packing. So he's chugging down the mountain. He's a little annoyed, but with nowhere left to turn and nothing to lose, he takes a rope and hangs it from the ceiling. And lo and behold, the monkey starts going up and down the rope and up and down the rope, and it stops disrupting the shop. So he said, oh my God, maybe he is a wise man. Treks back up the hill, waits in line, and he wants to thank him and tell him. So he says, the rope thing actually worked. And he looked at him and he said, the monkey is the mind, the rope is the mantra. So the mind needs something to anchor on so that you can use the mind to move beyond the mind to other states of consciousness. The mind's supposed to jump from thought to thought, but we don't have to swing at every pitch. We don't have to follow every single thought all the way down the line and create physiological changes. We can watch it, we can observe it, and we can let it be. And so there's lots of research. TM uses different mantras. This is a mantra study that was done on hospital workers. They used a very neutral mantra like I am well, nothing esoteric at all. And there were statistical improvements in stress, anxiety, and spiritual well-being. Mindfulness. So mindfulness is everywhere now. I'm surprised there's not a mindfulness ice cream flavor. And a lot of people throw it around and don't really understand to the depth of what it really means. But it means paying attention on purpose in the present moment in a non-judgmental way. And non-judgment is really the key here. Non-judgment to the Buddhists is the state of freedom or liberation. So love is the absence of judgment. So there's 3 phases really of mindfulness. And the first is what we call the sacred pause, as people begin to pause and they become aware of what they're thinking, feeling, and what's going on around them. And most people think that that's all there is. We just stop there. But that's not all there is. First, it's becoming aware of what you're thinking, feeling, and what's going on around you, being very present. And then it's staying with what you're thinking and feeling. Especially if the emotions are uncomfortable, our natural impulse is to jump to something else and not really stay. So there's an investigation component. There's a being with whatever it is. So you're not indulging the thought or the feeling, and you're not suppressing it. You're just being with it. And then the third wing of mindfulness is complete compassionate acceptance of what is. So I'm going to tell a personal story so that you understand this. I'm going to throw myself out there. I'm going to give you a little backstory first. I have 4 brothers and a sister. And my 4 brothers, we all went to Rye High School in Rye, New York. And if you graduate the top 5 in your graduating class from Rye High School, you get a brick put on the wall at Rye High School with your name on it. You're immortalized at Rye High School. So all 4 of my brothers were in the top 5. They all got bricks. God knows where I was in the line, but not mentionable. So that's the backstory. So my dad dies last year, and we have this big Italian wake in Rye because my parents still live in Rye. And I'm on the receiving line, standing next to my mother, and all of my brothers and all the teachers and people in the community come through, and people are still talking about, oh, all 4 of them have bricks on the wall. And I can't tell you how many times on the receiving line, my mom and various people were still talking about these bricks on the wall, my brothers. So I'm sitting there, and I'm becoming aware that I'm getting pissed off. I'm getting angry. Like I'm trying to mourn my dad. I'm like fired up. I'm like, oh my God, like I can't even fully be here. I'm so pissed off. And so it's like, oh, just sit with it, because the impulse is to do one or two things. Either to give an elaborate justification of why I'm right to be angry. They're still talking about this. This is crazy, blah, 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 blah. Or an elaborate justification, or to just completely ignore it and jump to something else. Neither one of those isn't going to get you where you want to be. So I did the investigation piece. I was like, okay, I'm aware. I'm pissed off. What's this about for me? And I had to ask several times because the anger was like really, big. Even though no one could see it, I was smiling. And all of a sudden I was standing there, I was like, oh, I don't feel as smart as them. That simple. I don't feel as smart as them. And then I threw compassion at it. I was like, it's okay. You might not be as smart as them, but it's okay. And so I sat with it. I threw compassion, moved on throughout the rest of the wake, and the grip loosened a little bit. So next day, I'm driving down, and now we're having the church ceremony. The wake was done. We're having the church ceremony. I get this call from my mom, and my mom's like, Monique, you got to get here. You got to get here. The boys don't know how to put the pictures, my dad's photograph, on the poster board that I bought. I was like, Mom, I printed out the pictures. I bought the poster board. I gave you the sticky tape. They just need to take the pictures and put it on the poster board. And she's like, they can't do it. They were trying. They can't figure it out. I was like, you mean to tell me that none of these boy geniuses could figure out how to put the picture on the board? And she's like, no, you got to get her. You got to get her. She's all crazy, right? Because she really wants these pictures up there of my dad in the church. So I said, Mom, I'll be right there. I just have to drive by Rye High School. She's like, why are you driving by Rye High School? I was like, I got to take a couple of the bricks off the wall. And she started laughing. But that's the potential of it. It only took me 40 years, but that's the potential. Not that things go away, but you understand them and they're not so gripping. They're out here and you can begin to make another choice in the way of being with it.